Hey guys, so today I'm going to be making an auto replant plugin. If you're not familiar with what that would be, basically it's a plugin that checks whenever you break any kind of block, it tries to see if that is a fully grown crop and if you have the seed for that kind of crop in your inventory. And if you do, then it takes away one seed and then just automatically plants it for you. So you don't have to replant things yourself. So it's pretty useful. And we're not going to go too in depth in it. We're not going to do configurations for it or anything like that. We're just going to get the core like foundation for it in here. And you can add more to it if you would like to. This tutorial, I will say, is definitely past beginner level, like complete beginner. So if you haven't watched anything about Java or Spigot development, I think a fair bit of this will go over your head. You still definitely can get something out of this, but don't expect to understand everything. If at any point you do feel completely lost, I would say go ahead, watch some tutorials. Honestly, you only need a few hours of experience, and then you'll be able to come back here and actually really kind of like understand what we're going through. So, just letting you know if you're a little bit lost, just look at some more basic stuff first before watching this one. But this is pretty beginner stuff, so if you are learning right now and you just want a tutorial, this is a great place to look. So anyways, let's actually start enough of the introduction stuff. The first thing is make sure you have all of this basic setup here. So this code here, I actually use a plugin. If you go to File Settings, Plugins, you can see I use this plugin in IntelliJ. You can find it in the marketplace. And it allows me to just, whenever I make a new project, I actually have a tab for Spigot in here. Also make sure you're using a 1.8 Java SDK. I think most of us, if you have done anything Spigot related, know how to get to this point, so I'm not going to go any more into this. If you don't know how to get to this point, that's a good sign that you need to just look up a few things before watching this one. Anyways, the first thing I want to do with my plugin is I want to have some way of getting the instance of my plugin itself. And it's actually really easy to do. We can just make some kind of variable of type plugin, press Alt-Enter on anything that's not imported, and you can automatically import that with IntelliJ. And this plugin, this variable of the plugin type is going to hold the instance of my plugin. So if that doesn't make sense, don't worry about it. It's not too important, honestly. But all you need to do is just make a variable, and then in your onEnable function, write instance equals this. And now we probably want to have some way of actually getting this instance. And for that, we can just right click and go to generate. And let's have a getter and just select your instance. And you can manually write this out if you want to. Not a big deal. I think it's easier to just use your kind of basic stuff that IntelliJ gives you, because this stuff can get repetitive to write all the time. But anyways, we now have an instance, and we have a way of accessing it through this function down here, the getInstance function. So that's our basic setup out of the way. Let's actually add our event. So, like I was saying, we want to check whenever someone breaks a block if that block is a crop, and kind of go down the line of functions from there. So let's go and set up that kind of functionality. So in our very last package here, mine is named test replant. You can name yours whatever you want, but that is my very last package here. I'm going to go to new package, and I'm going to call this events. I think it's important to stay organized here. So in my new events package, I'm going to make a new Java class and call it onBlockBreak. Okay, we are going to need to implement the listener here. This is a bucket listener, so just make sure you're using that one, because there is quite a few listeners. Make sure you're using org.bucket.event.listener. And this is an interface. If you're not familiar with interfaces, that might be a good thing to look up, because they get a little bit complicated. But if you don't understand the interfaces completely, it's actually not too big of a deal. We're just going to be using the event handler function from the interface here. So you can basically just copy this part. We just write at event handler, and then we just need to make some kind of function. So I'm calling mine block break. and my function needs to have some kind of event in it. So if you type in here, you can see there is so many different types of events. We have player bed enter event, player leave event, player interact event. The one we're going to be looking for this one is the block break event. And we need to just give this event a name. So I'm just going to write E here, but you can type whatever you want for there. That's just the name of the event we're using here. All right. So hopefully that made sense. We are just going to be having a function that runs every time a block is broken, and that's what this basic setup here does. Now, before we actually start typing anything in this event, I want to make sure this is actually registered. So before we use this too much, let's go back to our main class and register that event. This is actually really easy to do, but you probably do just need to memorize this line of code. We're going to write get server dot get plugin manager dot register events and type new and then whatever you named your class there. So mine is named on block break. Make sure you import it. I have it imported up here. And then we can type instance because I am using the instance variable I made here. Or you can type this. Either one's going to work just fine. All right, so now our event is registered and we can pretty much stay out of this class for the rest of this. We really don't need this anymore. Everything that we need from this is done. We pretty much just need to work in this event class itself. So first things first, let's make our block. So block equals e.getBlock. So what I'm doing here is I am making a variable called block, and it is of type block, which hopefully makes sense. It's kind of a mouthful. And then we're using the event, the variable that I named the event, and this variable has functions built into it, and one of them is the get block event. So this will give me whatever block was broken from this event. And we can also get the player from this, which will probably be pretty useful here in a little bit when we start trying to access the inventory of the player that broke the block. So this gives you the block from the event, and this gets you the player from the event. The next thing we're probably going to want to do is to make sure that whatever we're working with is actually a crop. We could use, for people who are a little bit more advanced, a really easy way to check if it's a crop is to use instance of ageable. But for this, I'm not going to do that because I think that that's a little bit confusing. So, and if that made no sense to you, don't worry about it. We're going to do the simple way of doing this. So, how are we going to make sure that it is a crop? Let's make a material object here. And we'll call it crop block type. And I'm just going to set this to null. So it equals nothing, basically, at this point. And if you aren't familiar with materials, these are enumerations, which doesn't matter too much, but basically what this will do is you can look, these are like your type of blocks, and there's a lot of things you can do with these, but these enumerations actually contain every single type of block in the game. So if you do material dot, you can see everything in the game is of the type material. So let's go ahead and use this to our advantage by seeing if the block that we just broke, so we have block up here, and if we get the type of that, that will give us a material type back. So we can actually get the type of material the block is, and we can see if that's a wheat block, then let's say that our crop block type that we're using is a wheat type. So all I'm doing here is basically checking to make sure that we're working with something that's actually a crop. Originally this equals null, but if we're breaking wheat, then it'll start equaling wheat. And we can add in else ifs with this. Potatoes. So we could do this for literally every type of crop in the game. For the sake of time, I'm just going to do wheat for this tutorial. But basically all you got to know is if you are trying to add more crops, you just have to put in else ifs with every kind of crop. It should be pretty easy to go along. I don't think you learn a lot from just completely copying and pasting code anyways, so if you are trying to expand this to other crops, do a little bit of research on the material types and make sure that you're just getting the right material, and you should be able to figure out just fine from this. We now have it so that the crop block type is of the type that we want. So what we need to do is to see, is that crop actually fully grown? So let's see if our crop block type does not equal null. So basically, if it did equal some kind of crop. If this doesn't run, then that means it was probably just anything else. It could have been dirt, cobblestone, whatever. And at that point, it will still equal null. So we're going to do not equals null. And we want to see if the crop is fully grown as well, which we're going to make a new plugin for that, or a new function, I mean. So before we finish this if block statement here, let's go ahead and make a new function actually. Let's go public void is fully grown, and let's take in the block that we're working with. All right. Now, this is our parameter here. We are taking in our block object from up here. And we want to see if this block is actually a fully grown block. And Minecraft has a pretty good way of doing that, actually, by using the ageable class. So this will probably be something you just need to memorize at this point, honestly. I'm going to use the ageable class. And you can see here that if we do this line of code here, what we are doing here is we are actually casting our block to the ageable type. And what this does is ageable has a lot of methods for us to use. We can see get age, get maximum age, and set age. And these methods allow us to kind of work with crops because crops are ageable. Ageable just talks about how grown something is usually. It has that kind of like, so like if a crop is fully grown, then it's going to have its maximum age, basically. Be like its age will equal its maximum age, I should say. Hopefully that makes sense, but I think it should here in just a second. So we're gonna say int maximum age equals ageable dot get maximum age. So this maximum age could be something completely different depending on what crop we're working with. But since we're passing in the block, it's going to get the maximum age of whatever kind of block we're working with. And all we want to do is see if the block's current age is equal to its maximum age. Because if it is equal to its maximum age currently, that means that block is fully grown. So all we have to do that is just say return ageable.getAge equals maximum age. So all I'm doing here, oh, I shouldn't have made that a void, my bad. This is a Boolean. So all I'm doing here is I'm saying check if the ageable of the block that we're working with currently is equal to the maximum age of that block. If it is as old as it can be, because that means it's fully grown. Hopefully that makes sense. If any of these things aren't making sense though, the Spigot documentation is super helpful for understanding this kind of stuff. So go ahead and give that a read for any part of this that makes no sense, I guess. I think that this is honestly the most complicated little bit here, though, of the whole thing. So if you don't completely understand that, that's fine. But now that we have this function, we can return back up to our if statement. And all we're going to say is if our crop is not equal to null, and we want to check if it is fully grown. So let's pass in our block. So if both of these statements are true, then we know we're working with something that we actually want to work with. Now that we know that, let's make sure that we have our seed situation working. So material seed type equals, and I'm gonna make another function for this actually. Let's go ahead and have a function that gives us whatever seed we are working with. So if we're working with wheat, we want this function to give us back wheat seeds. If we're working with potatoes, we want to have the potato item, that kind of thing. I think separating this stuff into functions will make it a lot more manageable. So before we finish this part now, let's make a new function for it. So let's call this get seed material, and we're going to pass in whatever kind of crop we are working with. So that crop block type. And let's just say if crop block type equals material dot wheat, then the kind of seed we want is wheat seeds. So we just do wheat underscore seeds. So we'll just have it return wheat seeds to us. Pretty simple. And if you want this to have more options, so if we're working with carrots, I'm going to actually show you how carrots would work. Carrots look a little different. So we could also say instead like material dot carrots, and the item form of the carrot is material dot carrot without the s. So you just have to put in else ifs basically to get whatever seed type you want. Again, I'm just going to be working with wheat seeds, but anytime we're trying to add more stuff here, we can just use else ifs. I will say for people who are more advanced, this is actually set up really well for a hash map, but that is outside the scope of this, so I do know that a hash map would be better here, but that's a little bit more complicated than what I'm trying to do here. So anyways, let's go back. We now have a function that can return to us the seed type that we're using. So we'll type in get seed material and pass in the current crop that we are using. So now that we have that, we need to have some kind of way of checking if we even have the seed in our inventory. Again, this is an important part with programming. You kind of want to keep things separated in a way. We don't want to have all of our functionality of our entire plugin in one function. So anytime you're kind of working with something that seems like a completely different concept or a different process, we want to make a new function for it. So right now I'm thinking I want to see, we now know what seed we're working with, but I want to know if that seed's even in my inventory. So let's have some kind of function that can do that. So that's going to look like a Boolean, so a true or false. And we'll say is seed in inventory. And we're going to pass in the player as well as the crop block type that we were using here. Okay. Now, we're trying to see if it's in our inventory. We can actually really easily get the inventory from the player. So all we have to do is use player inventory and just do player.get inventory. Here we go. So I just made a variable player inventory of type player inventory. And to get that, we just do player.get inventory. There's actually a lot of methods that come from this player class. So I do not know why I just spammed that many things. So if you are curious doing player dot, you can check out just how many things you can work with here. It's actually pretty cool how much stuff there is. So mess around with some stuff, have some fun with it. But for now, that is how we get our player's inventory, is this player.inventory function. So let's see if the player actually has this seed type. Let's just check if, so for example, if the crop that we're working with is wheat, we want to see if the player's inventory dot contains, and let's just see if it contains material dot wheat seeds. I think that should do it. Oh, this is player inventory. Actually, I'm just going to call this inventory, actually. So just to make sure everyone kind of gets what I just changed there, I had this named player inventory, but I'm just going to call it inventory because I think it's easier. So all I'm doing here is returning, though, whether or not the inventory contains this wheat seeds seed, because if the inventory does have that, then we know that that seed is in their inventory. And if this if block is never ran, then we already know that the answer is false. So we can just put return false at the bottom there, outside of our function, or outside of our if statement here. Okay, so we are now done with that. We have a way of checking if the seed is in the inventory. So if seed is in inventory, I am now returning back. This function here is kind of like the main functionality of our plugin. But anyways, I am now passing into this our function we just made here. I'm going to put my player, because I am using player as a parameter. And I'm going to put in the crop block type. And we're just checking if this is true. So as long as the seed is in the player's inventory, then we're ready to remove that seed from the player's inventory. Again, this is a really good opportunity to make a new function. I think anytime that we're doing a completely separate process, make a new function for it. So let's make our new function for removing a seed. Public void remove seed, and let's take in the player, and let's take in the seed type that we are working with. Awesome. Okay. So, going through a player's inventory is a little bit of a process, actually. I am going to just type it out and then explain it to you. Okay, so I'm back now. Like I was saying, I did want to write out this function before trying to explain it because it is not intuitive. It is not difficult at all, honestly, once you understand it, but it is probably the least intuitive thing that is going on here in this plugin, I think. So, I just wanted to have this written out. Go ahead, if you are following along, pause this, copy down this code, and we're going to talk about every part of it. And then, you know, if you want to, you're going to use this kind of code for removing any kind of item from an inventory, so you'll use this a lot, but the first time around, I think it's easier. Let's just talk about it and not worry about writing it perfectly together the first time. So, anyways, let's talk about what I'm doing here. I am making a seed index location because for us to remove the seed, we actually need to know where that seed exists in our player's inventory. Our player's inventory is like a grid of indexes. So one slot might be 0, next slot's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. And we need to know the index, so the spot in the inventory that our seed lies. And I'm setting this to -1 because if the seed is not found, then I'm able to use this -1 that I set it to for my advantage. So down here, I'm using this little block of code to remove a seed, but only if the index doesn't equal -1. So basically what happens is this block of code gives us the seed index if it exists. If it doesn't, then it's just going to stay as -1, which would mean no seed gets removed. Hopefully that part makes sense. But anyways, first little block of code here, we have an item stack. An item stack is just a stack of items. That should hopefully make sense. And we have our player's inventory. I was showing you guys how to do that before. Now, for this little block of code, we are using a for loop to iterate through the entirety of the player's inventory. So we start off at 0, and we want to iterate through the entire inventory. So we are going to say the index is less than inventory.getSize. And for each iteration, we're going to say the current items equals the inventory.getItem at our current index for our for loop. And we just want to make sure, as long as the items is not null, so there is some kind of item there, we're going to check if the item there actually equals a seed type we're looking for. And if it does, that's awesome. We found the seed index location that we're looking for. So we're going to set this seed index location up here equal to the current index. And just to be able to break out of this for loop because we don't need it anymore, I just said slot index equals inventory.getSize because that makes this for loop just break. We're done with it. So anyways, now that we have our seed index location, we can move into the next part of the function. And all this does is get the item stack that is at the index of the seeds, basically. We just found that from our for loop. So we can do that from doing inventory.getItem and then an index. And as long as this does not equal null, which it really shouldn't, but I think putting this stuff there's no problem with putting some additional checks in there. As long as it's not null, we're going to check and see how many seeds are actually in that item stack. And that's pretty easy. We just make an integer, and we say seed amount equals seed item stack dot get amount. So how many seeds are in that item stack? And now all we want to do is just set that item stack to have one less seed. So we just do dot set amount, and we just subtract 1 from how many seeds were in it before. So again, go ahead, pause, copy this down if it doesn't make sense, but this is how we are going to remove a seed from the player's inventory. Okay, I hope you guys are still all with me. So let's go back up to the main function, our break event. This is where the main functionality of our plugin lives. And we're going to just type remove seed, and let's put in our player and put in our seed type. And now that function is done. We are ready to move on. Okay, so now that we have a way of actually getting the seed out of the player's inventory that we want, we just need to replant that crop in the world. And this is not too bad, except for it needing a delay. That's the one part of this that kind of is a little bit confusing. But we're just going to kind of copy and paste for this part, honestly. Don't worry about it too much because we're using a Lambda here, which, if you're new to this, you probably haven't heard of before, and it's a little bit more advanced. But definitely look up Lambdas if you're curious. But we are going to make a new function. And we are going to definitely need the location here. We want to know where to plant this crop. And I'm also going to take in the crop block type so that we know, like, this is the kind of block we're using. So anyways, this is the part that I was saying we need to just copy. So we're going to do bucket.getScheduler.run task later. So this is how we are making the delay. Now remember that instance we made at the very beginning? We are gonna actually get that. So that's useful, I think. I actually have this set to public, don't I? Should probably set that equal to private. Doesn't really matter too much. But, okay. We've gotten our instance now, and we've passed it into here. The next part is to actually kind of create that Lambda expression I was talking about. So that is done like this. Just copy and paste this. Trust me on this one. It is not something that can be explained in a short little video. So all we're doing here is we're basically making a function without making a legit function. We're not like putting all the public void stuff. We're not doing anything. That's my best simple explanation. And right here, we're putting the delay. This is how long we want this to wait before doing the tasks that are inside these brackets. So once you have all of this done, then we can get back to not just copying and pasting and not fully understanding what we're doing. That part's just a little bit beyond the scope of what I want us to get. And it's honestly fine if there's some things you don't get when you're coding. You don't have to know everything you're doing 100%. As long as you know how to use them, you don't always need to know the why while you're just kind of getting started. So anyways, we have the location. We pass that into here, and we want to do location.getBlock. So get whatever block is at that location. It's probably going to be air because you just broke it, honestly. And now that we have that block, we're going to set that block to be the type of block that was already broken, because a fully grown wheat and a wheat that is not grown at all is the same exact crop block type. They're just different in ages. So we can just pass the same kind of crop into here, and this is all we need. This is done. So now all we have to do is call this function, and that will go right under our remove seed function. We'll just do replant crop. Let's do block.getLocation. This will give us the location we need. Crop block type, and we're done. Yeah, this is it. So I am going to real quick make this plugin. The way of doing that, if you've not done it before, you just go to Maven over here, Lifecycle, and we can package this. And now we will have our jar file, and I'm going to just throw this into a test server real quick and show you guys that it works, and then we're done. Okay, let's see it in practice. So we plant the crop, nothing happens because it's not fully grown. But if it is a fully grown crop, then there we go. And you can see I actually added a particle effect there and a sound. I will, if anyone gets stuck on it, I'll give you guys the answer, but I would like you guys to try and figure out how to do that yourself. I will tell you it is only 2 lines of code. I've already kind of put an area in your plugin there that it would make sense to add in. So you definitely can do this, and it is not difficult. But if you do get stuck, go ahead, just tell me in the comments. I'll go ahead and help you out. But I think it would be a good opportunity to try to learn something new there. And I did also, it's super, super quick to add in more things here, actually. And all you have to do is use else ifs, and you can start adding in more crops here. So I just didn't want to make it super tedious, but it is super easy to add in as many crops into our plugin as we want, and it will use the correct type as long as you just add in those else ifs. If you need help with anything adding to this plugin, let me know in the comments. I'm more than happy to help. But that is all they have for you guys today. So I hope this wasn't too hard to follow, and I hope you guys learned something new. And yeah, thanks for watching, guys. See ya.